Welcome to episode 42 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's December 12, 2001, in Prague. An 88-year-old man passes quietly in hospital. His name is Josef Bican, nicknamed Pepi. Outside the Czech Republic and Austria, not many people notice. Yet by some counts, this man scored more goals in official football matches than anyone who has ever played the game. Comfortably over 800 in competitive fixtures, and well into the 900s if you include everything the statisticians can dig up. He was part of Austria's Wunderteam in the 1930s. He was a great centre forward of Slavia Prague. He was a man who turned scoring into something more almost routine, and then watched his legend disappear behind war, politics, and the lack of television cameras. Today, we'll trace Bican's journey from a poor boy in Vienna to the Mitropa Cup with Slavia Prague. Explain how World War II, the Nazis, and then the Communists kept him out of the global spotlight. Unpack the famous numbers 805, 821, and 950 plus, and what they actually mean. And ask what it says about football history that one of its greatest scorers passed as a relatively forgotten figure. Josef Bican was born on September 25, 1913 in Vienna, then part of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, to a Czech family. His father František worked on the railways and played a bit of football himself. His mother Ludmila cleaned, cooked, and did whatever job she could find to keep the family afloat. This is not the story of a boy who came from privilege. There are stories of little Pepi playing barefoot in the streets of Vienna's working-class districts, kicking around everything vaguely round, and turning up to youth games in boots that didn't fit. Football was the obvious way out, if you were good enough. And he was. As a teenager, he joined Rapid Wien, one of the giants of Austrian football. By 1931, he's in the first team, and almost immediately, he's scoring at a rate that makes coaches and defenders rub their eyes. For Rapid, he racks up more goals than games in the league, dozens upon dozens in just a few seasons, and helped them to domestic titles. He was quick, strong, two-footed, and had a classic old-school centre-forward profile, broad shoulders, powerful thighs, and a shot that stayed hit. That form took him into the Austrian national team, the famous Wunderteam, coached by Hugo Meisel. The 1934 World Cup in Italy, Bican scored in Austria's 3-2 win over France. Austria reached the semi-finals. They were one of the dominant sides of the era, playing a technical short-passing game that impressed observers across Europe. Bican wasn't yet at his absolute peak, but he was already firmly in the top tier of European forwards. If the story stopped there, he'd still be a notable name in football history, but he moves, literally and politically, into something much bigger. In 1937, Bican left Vienna for Slavia Prague, the club of his Czech roots. It is here that he becomes Pepi Bican, the myth. In Prague, he finds a team that's built to attack, clever inside forwards, wingers who can cross, midfielders who can find him early, and he pays them back by scoring at a rate that basically breaks the charts. Across his time with Slavia, the best statistical reconstructions give him something like 600 goals in roughly 300 official matches for the club. Season after season, he's scoring 40, 50, 60 times in league and cup. In 1938, he helped Slavia win the Mitropa Cup, the top Central European club competition of its day. This is pre-European Cup, pre-Champions League, but in the 1930s, the Mitropa Cup is as glamorous as it gets in continental club football. Slavia beat Ferencváros of Hungary in the final, and Bican scores, of course. At the same time, politics is tightening around him. Bican is ethnically Czech, and he wants to play for Czechoslovakia rather than Austria. He applies for Czechoslovak citizenship so he can represent his ancestral country at the 1938 World Cup in France. The paperwork drags. Depending on whose version you believe, there are clerical errors, delays, maybe even political reluctance. The bottom line, by the time Czechoslovakia kick off at that World Cup, Pepi Bican is not yet eligible, and he misses what should have been a peak year's World Cup. Then, later that year, comes the Anschluss, Nazi Germany's annexation of Austria and the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia. Bican is pressured to play for a greater German national team. He refuses. So here's the contrast. On the pitch, he's one of the most lethal strikers in Europe. Off the pitch, he's saying no to the powers that be and paying a price in terms of visibility and opportunity. With Central Europe under occupation, football doesn't stop, but it changes shape. In the wartime protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a reconfigured league continues. For the locals, it's both a distraction and a quiet statement of identity. For Bican, it becomes the canvas for one of the most absurd scoring runs any forward has ever had. In season after season, he's rattling in goals at a rate that looks like a typo. You see individual campaigns with 40 plus, 50 plus, even 60 plus league goals. There's a famous run where he scores in 19 consecutive league matches, and piles up almost 50 goals in that streak alone. He also plays, very briefly, for wartime Bohemian Moravia national side, scoring hat-tricks against Germany. Even in that uncomfortable context, his scoring instincts don't switch off. Now it's fair to ask, how strong was the competition? The answer is stronger than some detractors later claimed. Central European football at the time is technically sophisticated. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia are all high-level football cultures. The leagues are regionalized, the politics are dark, and there's no global stage like a World Cup or proper European Cup to showcase what Bican is doing. His goals are being watched by thousands in Prague, but not by millions on TV. His numbers are being written in local newspapers, not in FIFA yearbooks. The war ends, a new political system arrives, and Bican has to navigate a second regime that wants to use footballers for its own messaging. In 1948, the communists take power in Czechoslovakia. Once again, Bican is a star in a landscape where stars are expected to line up with the party. Once again, he says no when invited to join. He's not thrown in jail, he's not put on a show trial, but he's quietly sidelined. He moves on from Slavia to other clubs like Vikovice and Hajduk Králové, still scoring, but increasingly far from the center of attention. When he stops playing, he moves into coaching and other work, but he doesn't become the grand old man of Czechoslovak football in the way you might expect for someone with his numbers. His refusal to play the propaganda game, first under the Nazis, then under the communists, leaves him with no state apparatus to promote his legend. In another country, with another political history, you can imagine Bican being turned into a national myth, statues, documentaries, endless retrospectives. In Czechoslovakia, his achievements are respected by those who know, but never fully amplified. Only after the fall of the regime in 1989 does he start to receive more formal honors, Hall of Fame inductions, official recognitions as one of the game's great scorers. But by then he's already in his late 70s. And yet, underneath all that political noise, the same question keeps popping up. How many goals did this man actually score? This is the part where modern fans' eyes either light up or glaze over. Different organizations, different methodologies, different totals. Let's keep it simple and focus on the ballpark, literally. If you limit yourself to what everyone agrees are official competitive matches, league, domestic cups, recognized representative games, the careful reconstructions put Bican somewhere north of 800 goals. That's competitive fixtures only, not including friendlies and exhibition games. A commonly cited number is 805 official goals. Some Czech statisticians, going through match reports and archives, land on 821 in official competitions. Other researchers who count a slightly wider range of tournaments get him into the 950 plus range. The exact figure varies because wartime records weren't always perfect, and some competitions have an ambiguous status, and you're dealing with clubs and associations that don't always agree on what counts. But practically everyone serious about the data agrees on two key points. He scores well over 800 competitive goals, and he did it with an absurd goals per game rate, roughly 1.5 goals per match at club level. To put that in perspective, modern superstars like Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi sit in that 700 to 800 plus competitive goal zone, but across many more seasons and games, with ratios closer to a goal every 1.4 to 1.8 games. That is astonishing in its own right. And remember, Bican was 1.5 goals per game. Bican is in that tiny club where if you take the most conservative of his totals and the most generous of theirs, his ratio is vastly better. He once joked, when told that people doubted his numbers, "If I said I scored 5 times as many goals as Pelé, who would have believed me?" Behind that humor, there's a truth. His career happened in a time and a place that the global football memory doesn't always keep front of mind. So why isn't Pepi Bican more famous? Part of it is timing. His peak years would have been the early 1940s World Cups, 1942 and 46, tournaments that never happened because of World War II. He never got the chance to dominate a World Cup in his prime the way Pelé did in 1958, or Ronaldo or Messi did on live television. Part of it is geography. He never played for Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, or Manchester United. He never dazzled Brazilian crowds in Santos wide. His great club exploits were in the Czech and Austrian context, and in the Mitropa Cup, competitions that lost their central place in the football imagination once the European Cup and TV age arrived. And part of it is politics. By refusing both Nazi and communist demands to play their game, he effectively ensured that no big state machine would spend decades myth-making on his behalf. There were no endless newsreels, no official cult of the Pepi, the proletarian goal machine, no carefully curated narrative for export. And part of it is just record-keeping and narrative preference. When later generations fall in love with football, they gravitate toward the players they've seen, the tournaments they watched live, the goals that have a YouTube link. Here are 800 plus goals, most of them in black and white, many of them in leagues you never watched, is probably a harder sell. So on this day in 2001, when Josef Pepi Bican passes in Prague and is laid to rest among Czech cultural greats, there's a disconnect. Locally, he's rightly honored as a legend, but globally, he's almost never heard of. In the years since, as statisticians and historians have dug deeper, his name has started to re-emerge. Lists of all-time top scorers suddenly have this mysterious figure up at the top or near it. Fans stumble across his tally and think, how do I not know about this guy? That's the paradox of Pepi Bican. By any reasonable measure of goal scoring, he belongs in the same space as the biggest names in the sport, but his career unfolded in the wrong decades, behind the wrong borders, under the wrong regimes, and without the spotlight that today's stars take for granted. On this day in 2001, he passed away, and slowly the global game has been catching up to what Central Europe already knew. This quiet man from Vienna and Prague might just have been the most prolific goal scorer football has ever seen. That's all for episode 42 of OTD, the day the game quietly lost Josef Pepi Bican, the forgotten goal machine. If you got favorite Bican stories or your own research on his goal tallies, then email us at otd@17lawsguy.com. Subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so more stats nerds can find us. Tomorrow, in episode 43, we move from Central Europe to the English Midlands, to 1953 at Molineux, when Wolves beat Honved under the floodlights, and English press declared them world champions, and a French journalist started asking, shouldn't there be a real European Cup instead? Stay tuned, and see you then.